I'm Cynthia Hammer. I'm a board member of the Inattentive ADHD Coalition, and we have a project to try to get girls with ADHD diagnosed before they turn 8. And as part of that, we're trying to educate parents and teachers so they can recognize the signs of what it was like for girls when they were little, hoping that we can help to get more girls diagnosed by age 8. And today I'm talking to Arianna White. She was diagnosed as an adult with ADHD, but she is now a counselor for students that have ADHD, and she's going to help us learn what the journey is like for someone who didn't get diagnosed during childhood and what people could have known that would have helped her get diagnosed during childhood. Ariana, now that you look back at your life, what do you think was going on with you as a child that if people were alerted to it, they would have recognized your ADHD? Is there anything that stands out for you?
I think what stands out for me is people always said that I was very mature for my age, but it was because I was very over controlled, right? I had gotten in trouble for forgetting things or misplacing things. And so I had started to become one of those people who had 10,000 strategies to get everything done. And looking back at it, I'm like, the energy that I put into trying not to get in trouble or making sure things were done really took away from my experience of just being a kid and mistakes are okay.
You were highly anxious that someone could have recognized your anxiety. But on the other hand, people get misdiagnosed with anxiety. Was there any other symptom besides your anxiety and your driving to be perfect?
I think the anxiety was a consequence of trying to manage my ADHD. For example, I would forget homework assignments constantly. I became a student who did my homework before I got home. It was really hard to identify because I was working so hard to hide that I wasn't good at these things. Or my mom would be like, "Where did you put your backpack?" If I didn't put it in the same place every day, I had no idea where that backpack was. And adults think about it as, oh, you're being irresponsible. You're a kid. You only have to keep track of two things. But if it was out of sight, it was out of my mind. And it was
So
really
you're
hard to
saying that
remember.
you were smart enough on your own, you figured out strategies that worked for you. But I often hear adults say, I knew I was different. I didn't know why I was different, but I knew I was different. Did you experience any of that?
I definitely did. I think it's the kind of intersection piece of I'm
Uh,
Black and also bisexual. Growing up, there was a lot different about me that I couldn't exactly pinpoint what was what.
Yeah,
And
that reminds me of one person I interviewed, and he grew up in poverty and he thought that was the cause of his problem. So sometimes if there's something else going on, it is harder.
because for me, I was always like a Black weird kid. So that was always what I felt like, okay, this is why I'm so different. Like, I'm weird and I'm very obsessed with like fantasy and vampires, and that's what made me weird. I didn't realize that was
Ah,
like my special interest that I'm hyper focusing on.
so when you were growing up, you had a lot of strategies you put in place. Was there any areas where you felt you weren't coping adequately?
I think even though I had all those strategies, they don't always work. Or there's things that if I don't get to do things in the same order that I'm used to doing it, then my strategy doesn't work and I'm still getting in trouble. So I think the consequence again was like, I'm very anxious now, even still as an adult, that I'm going to mess something up or I'm going to get something wrong or I'm going to forget something. So I think forgetfulness used to be like the biggest thing. For example, my mom might be like, get the whatever, go get my keys off of my dresser upstairs. By the time I got upstairs, I did not remember what I went up there for.
Do you remember what your self-talk was? Because that's the big concern is what children start telling themselves because they don't understand themselves.
I think the biggest kind of honestly the negative self-talk that I'm still addressing today is no matter like how hard I work to have all of these strategies, it's never going to be good enough because
Mm.
it'd be like 10 times, 9 times I can use my strategy, but that 10th time I'm really upset with myself about like, that you mess up these things. It's hard for you. Why didn't you do this? And you could have avoided that.
So you haven't gotten to the kindness point yet.
We're working on it.
You told us how you managed during childhood. When you get into adulthood, a lot of times children at home, their parents offer all the structure that they need, or there's a pattern to their life so that their ADHD can seem manageable. But for some, as they get into high school or to college, they're just thrown back on themselves. So as you got older, did you have different challenges and how did you manage those? You
The
were
real
still undiagnosed. So that's what we're talking about when you're undiagnosed.
Yeah, I made it through high school, college, and grad school without being diagnosed. It was, I think what I realized is that everything is not as hard for everyone else.
Mm.
Even in my sorority, it created a lot of structure because I was always in leadership roles. It creates formal and informal structure about like, you have to be an example for people, but we also have a lot of specific expectations about like how often you study a week and those kinds of things. My friends are like, I'm going to skip my study sessions this week because I want to go have fun. And I'm like, I can't. Like, if I skip my study sessions for a week, I'm going to mess up for the rest of the semester and I can't do that.
One thing I hear sometimes women, when they get diagnosed, they say it was fine until it wasn't. Would
Mhm.
you describe your life that way?
I definitely would because my husband is the reason why I got diagnosed because you work so hard and you're so exhausted by the end of the day. It's not this hard for people, so something else has to be going on.
Yeah, but I guess what I challenge the women who say it's fine till it wasn't, that it really wasn't fine. They were just surviving, they weren't thriving.
Yeah.
And after their diagnosis, they feel like their life changes and they start thriving. How would you describe your journey before diagnosis and after diagnosis?
I think there's moments now where I can offer myself a lot more kindness because I understand what's going on. But I think there's also like when I was initially diagnosed, this period of I just feel bad at everything because I don't have anxiety motivating me anymore to get these 12 things done. So it's like, how do I manage my ADHD without anxiety? And then it comes with more negative self-talk about like, is this even helpful to me, right? Am I using this as like a weakness or a crutch? So that's difficult. That was difficult when I first got diagnosed, and it can be difficult in times of transition.
So the other day, I talked to one woman who was very comfortable talking about her childhood and the challenges she had. And I said, that's pretty amazing. You can talk about it without getting very emotional. But what she said was, I've been in therapy for 20 years. And so I think that's the hidden cost of delayed diagnosis is all the negative self-talk people have given themselves. And this psychologist, her mission is to help children understand their brain, that your brain is good at these things and it's not good at that thing. And it's not a judgment. It's just, it's different.
And honestly, in college, it's the first time that you have a chance to develop strategies that work for you. Like you were saying, usually your parents provide the structure, they're telling you when to do things and where to go. It doesn't have to be the way that your mom would have structured it for you.
Yeah, I think that's what people learn. Some people is to free themselves from how society says you should do something and to figure out what works for themselves.
And I think for me, like the challenge comes from that there are some freedoms that I have now that I understand my ADHD better, but there are some things that I just don't have the luxury to drop the ball on.
Yes. I mean, I think the image of saying ADHD is like diabetes, it's something, it's a condition you're going to have for your life, and you have to learn how to function your best with it. We have different amounts of symptoms. We have different severity of symptoms. One person with ADHD is different from another person with ADHD, and we each have to find our own way.
I think the biggest thing for me is how could I create like my own definition of self-worth
Mm.
outside of what I could offer for people? Because when I think about being a kid, my ADHD, the way that I managed a lot of it was through people pleasing. Like I was in private school for second to third grade and we had a joint classroom. So I always was a student who taught myself things at home. So I would be done with my third grade curriculum, listening to the second grade curriculum, and basically being a teacher's assistant in that class. So no one was looking to be like, that's strange. Like she's done all her work for third grade already. So I think my journey has been how can I feel good about myself? How can I find acceptance outside of what I can offer other people?
And I think, I don't know if this is what you're describing too, is that when a child is really bright and doing well, sometimes that's the only criteria. People say, oh, she's doing well in school, she's getting good grades. So they don't look deeper. And I think that's an area where we falsely just say, you can look at how they're doing socially, how they're doing at home, how they're doing with whatever, more than just that they're academically doing fine.
And I think some of the benefits for me is that my mom was a special ed teacher. So I think at home, I had a lot of support. And I think it was so ingrained into her because she was doing it for so long that
Mm-hmm.
neither of us were thinking about it. It's just, this is my kid and I'm addressing her needs. In school, like you said, I didn't get in trouble. So there was never a reason. I would get in trouble for talking too much, but that was, oh, she's a girl. So that's why it
Uh,
wasn't ever looked at as anything more.
do you think going undiagnosed for so many years caused other problems in your life?
I think it,
I mean, excuse
oh,
me, one
good.
woman I talked to said that now that she's 50, but when she realized she had a lot of bad relationships because of her impulsivity and just other characteristics that were her AD in action, but she didn't recognize it. Going undiagnosed for all those years, did it cause other problems in your life?
I think it the anxiety and the ADHD I feel like are very tied together because a lot of my anxiety was around things like impulsively talking in social situations. I could never figure out the rhythm as a kid. So things like I didn't know how to talk in groups or like the rhythm of conversation. And I didn't understand that a lot of times people don't want to hear you talk for 15 minutes about the thing that's passionate. That doesn't feel like a conversation. I think the other things were just I have a lot of different interests. That kind of quote about, yeah, you're mediocre at a bunch of things because you never really dedicate time to one thing. And I wouldn't describe myself as mediocre, but I do think it's hard to find community and connection when you're jumping from thing to thing. And I didn't realize it was happening or the moments that I was missing connection because my brain was like running at 10,000 miles per hour. Limitations and rules that I put on myself. Like my whole first year of undergrad and college, I didn't do anything fun because I was so afraid of failing because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have like my mom to help me provide structure.
That I think those are the hidden burdens of not getting diagnosed early, and we have to bring more awareness to that, that it has a lifelong impact. So you already mentioned your husband was helpful in getting the diagnosis. Is he helpful in other ways? And who else or what else is helping you with your current life feeling successful?
I think I've really worked hard to develop community. And my husband always teases me because he says that you live in a bubble. He's a lot of your friends have autism or ADHD. Like you all have really worked really hard to develop communication strategies that work for you all. So I'd say I have the best support system. Like I have really good friends who like we all know we have ADHD and we can be on like three different apps having three different conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And culturally there's oh you all are too clingy or you need too much attention or it's okay I don't want to talk about this right now but that chat lives over there or we can talk about all of these three things at the same time and we don't feel lost and we feel appreciated with one another. And I think my husband helps me a lot with just like the structure of my life because I impulsively say yes to a lot of things because I'm like I'm passionate and I want to be helpful. He helps me figure out where I need my guardrails to be because
Mm-hmm.
I'm just very prone to brone because I want to do so much.
What helped me a lot, Ariana, was writing my mission statement
Mhm.
and figuring out what was my values. And then it became easier to say yes or no. But when you meeting community, Catherine, that I do the interviews with, when we first became friends, she said, don't ever apologize, that she would accept my behavior, and vice versa for her. And so the other day when I didn't record, she did the whole interview and I didn't record it. It was like they just rolled with it because we want to be able to forgive each other. And if we're going to forgive them, we want them to forgive us. So I think finding those people who make you feel accepted is an important aspect. And to have a husband who's like that is key. Actually, in my book, people said that it was very obvious I have a supportive husband. Is there anything else you want to say about that? How did you find your community?
I think it was a lot of finding acceptance for who I was as a person and like what I need. So being clear with my friends about I like jumping from topic to topic because I think like what you said about the I'm sorry. There was one night that we were all in a group chat, and for some reason I just noticed it and I was like, why are you saying sorry? We all do this. That's part
Yeah.
of the benefit of us being friends is that we can switch from topic and engage and be excited. And I love when you like word vomit about your special interests. I don't know, diddly squat about like computers and engineering, but that's your thing. And
Uh-huh.
I just love you being excited about it. I think it's so hard. Me, when I was younger, and I see it in my students all the time, just it's hard to take up space and say that this is what makes me feel good because we just have so many messages saying that having needs is wrong and asking for them makes you clingy or inappropriate or you're a bad friend.
When you make me remember something I read, that if you have a child who's saying, I'm sorry a lot, you better pay attention to that child because they're starting to feel that how they are is not acceptable. And they're always apologizing for how they are or what they did. You have some support systems. You advise students. What kind of websites, books, what have you found helpful?
So there is an Instagram content creator called Self Love Rainbow, and I really love her stuff because it has so many just different tools for kind of different things. There's like an executive dysfunction workbook that talks through, hey, this is what executive functioning is, and it has this whole part about unhelpful thinking patterns where it's, hey, people with executive functioning tend to think that they're lazy. This is what laziness looks like, and this is what executive dysfunction looks like.
Hmm.
So I love that.
How do you use it?
So I use it for myself personally, just been structuring my life and figuring out like this is what a strength of mine is. And then it also has a section for here are some of your executive functioning skills that are more of a challenge. Here you can highlight and go through some things that you want to try in the future to help with those skills. And then I also, of course, use it with clients to help them
Yeah.
work through that process as well.
This psychologist we talked to the other day, she's created this metaphor to talk to children. They have highways, which are the things that are easy for them, and then they have construction zones, areas where they need to build their skills. So, do you have any advice that you would give a young girl, maybe envision an 8-year-old self who just heard she has ADHD? What kind of things would you say to her to maybe encourage her?
So I think of that as what would have been helpful for me at 8.
Do you feel like getting the diagnosis is going to limit them?
Your diagnosis won't limit your kid if they have you in their corner.
Hmm.
Because I think even now, I joke all the time with I'm like, if I had trouble, I actually just stopped working in higher ed. But when I did work in higher ed, if I had trouble with a boss or anything, of course, I'm not going to professionally ask my mom to come up and fight my battles, but she would. Having your parent always there to be like, there's nothing wrong with you. And we just have to learn how to help you navigate situations the best for you is invaluable. Because till
Hmm.
this day, like ADHD, not ADHD, whatever's going on with me, I have a relationship with my mom where I can go to her and she's going to listen. She's going to try to understand. And if I ask for guidance, she's going to offer that. But it's not the first thing that she jumps to. It's how do I walk with you to figure out this problem in a way that makes sense for you?
So, parental support and understanding is the foundation. Yeah.
Yes. Because schools, therapists, they're doing their best,
Hmm.
but they're doing their best within like very specific parameters. Like school, you need to be good at school. That's not all you are as a person, but your
Right.
parent has access to all of that and can really
Hmm.
help ground and support you in navigating that journey of who you are.
So, can you talk about medication and therapy? Have they played a role in your ADHD journey?
Medication honestly was the most valuable thing for me because it just made me realize that life did not have to be this hard. Yeah, like people are not constantly holding this list of everything that they need to get done. My husband, he says that for him, his list are like 1 through 10, but when he hears me talking, everything on my list is a one and it's paralyzing. But medication really helps me be able to slow my brain down and sort those things in the numbers that need to get done. I think therapy has really offered acceptance in that of I'm not always going to remember to take my medication,
Hmm.
but in those moments, how do I slow down and figure out what I need to get back to my routine? That's
You
exactly
know,
it.
the resilience is a key thing
Mhm.
because we're all going to have areas where we feel down on ourselves. But what do you say to yourself to get you to keep going forward?
For me, it's been helpful to have different sayings, or for a while it was I'm confident in my ability to succeed, or just I'm okay, I'm safe, and I'll make it to the next day. Just having those things that take me, I think, when you get overwhelmed, you're anxious, you're hard on yourself, you're so zoned in to like just that one thing. And those
Mm.
statements help me remember all the other things in life.
I feel different or I feel sad or depressed. I work on it till I realize why I'm feeling that way. Because to recognize what brought that emotion on by labeling it is really it really helps to make it go away. That's what I find.
I think for me, labeling it has come easy just because I went to school to be a therapist. And I think being a nerd and really using kind of media in my therapy, sometimes it's been helpful to be like, remember that episode of Steven Universe where Pearl was portrayed? What did you feel when you watched that? These feelings are the same. Sit in that. You can't just logic it away because you can label it.
You've been on a journey to experience your emotions more.
Yes.
Can you share any success stories that you think have resulted from having ADHD?
Yeah, so I'm 31 and I've been relatively successful in my career because lucky for me, my special interest is also like people in psychology. So I've done very well. Before leaving higher ed, I was the associate director of case management. I was interim director of a counseling center, and one that just doesn't happen for someone as young as I am, but it also doesn't happen for I'm a social worker. That's usually like a job for psychologists, and I was given that opportunity for several months. And I think one of the things that ADHD really helped me with is those roles have a lot of different pieces and a lot of different expectations. And while it was hard for me to manage the organization piece of that, my passion really got to show because you learn something new every day. You're being social and getting to know so many people from different departments and building connections. 12,000 interests. So at one point, like in high school, I was making balloon animals. It allows me to connect with all of these different people in different ways. And I think a lot of that has to do with my ADHD, right? Even if I only had this hobby for 2 weeks, allows me to make these connections with people and build meaningful relationships that ultimately help our students, help us build programming for the students who really need it.
So, what I hear you saying is that your ADHD brings you into a lot of different areas, and that in some places that's a benefit for you. But the other thing I think you're saying, which people say people with ADHD have, is a lot of empathy. That's why you're in social work. That's why I was in social work. That is a characteristic that's common to a lot of people with ADHD. So I think along the same lines, how does your understanding of ADHD change your view of yourself at all? Do you value some of your characteristics?
I don't know that it changes my view of myself as much as I think it has really helped giving me a whole picture of myself, because there was always like that question about like why am I like this, or why are these things going wrong?
Mm.
And to me, I've been able to look at it like, yeah, it's going wrong because you don't have the strategies, you don't have the support, but most of all, you don't have the compassion that you need for yourself to be able to do these things. So I think that has changed my view of myself. And I think the hard part is that kind of when I first got diagnosed, there's always the conversation about, is ADHD a disability or is it not? And up until maybe a couple months ago, I was like, this is just how my brain works. This isn't a disability. But I just had a situation where I was like, oh, wow, this is a disability for me sometimes, or it is all the time. Some of the things that I can't just power through, and I have to acknowledge that this comes with challenges as well. I've always been like, as a kid, I was thinking through
Yes.
strategies to not get in trouble. So having to
Mhm.
hit this wall as an adult was really hard for me. But I think being diagnosed, going to therapy, having a support system made it easier to sit with how difficult that was and recognize also that's not a fault on me. Like, we have a society that's not built to support a lot of different types of brains and people, and how sometimes that's just the way things are, and how I have to, it's okay to
Right.
be sad about it.
And for me, the other day when I did something that I was getting myself down on, I had to tell myself that everyone has problems, that we can end up thinking we have it worse than someone else. But I think it's hard to say that without knowing what someone else's life is like. So that helps me to put things in perspective. But I know that everyone with ADD has days when they just say they're very ashamed of what they did. And although they understand it, they still wish they hadn't done it.
And it can be hard because it feels like I can do all of these hard things, but remembering to brush my teeth is the thing I had
Ah,
difficulty with. And it just feels so silly, right? I'm an adult and I have a career. Why can't I do this thing?
yeah. I know when I wrote in my book that years ago when I was interviewed for someone for this newspaper article, she wanted to know how ADHD had changed my life. And I couldn't tell her that now I put my credit card back in my wallet
Yeah.
because it seems so minor, but those things are life changing, really.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. My husband put a key hook by the door, and I'm like, wow, I
Yeah,
have so
right.
much more free brain space.
Do you think ADD is preventing you from having your dreams?
No. If any one, like I mentioned, like I've been pretty successful and like I just transitioned to private practice full time. And I think ADHD has really encouraged me to be creative in ways that support me and my community. So I used to do a Dungeons and Dragons group for social anxiety,
Uh,
and I'm starting to offer that in the community, primarily focused on people with autism and ADHD. And I think my experience gaming with my friends really taught me a lot, and combining that with my therapeutic training, I would have never dreamed that that could be a job or something that I
uh.
could do if I didn't have ADHD. And
So the creativity and the risk taking, yeah, coming
yeah.
out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it somehow all adds up and you have achieved something new.
Yeah. And I think part of the kind of social aspects that I've mentioned, I've been able to meet so many people who are excited about it with me and
Hmm.
who help with some of that. One of my good friends is an artist, and I was just talking about it kind of offhand. And they show up 2 weeks later, hey, I made you this logo.
Ah,
And right, that's some of their ADHD. I'm sure they were avoiding a task that was more important than writing me a logo or making me a logo. But just that connection that we've made and the passion that we both have to help people with ADHD connect really has supported us in building this.
do you feel like you, probably not in the area where you work, if you make people aware that you have ADHD, there you don't experience any stigma, but have you had to announce your ADHD anywhere that you felt it caused you stigma?
I don't think that, so I think it has caused stigma, but I think what happens is because there's still that piece of me is that kid who like people pleases and wants to be perfect, that people are less likely to believe that I have ADHD.
Ah.
Yeah. So I've gotten a lot of feedback about you're so good at these administrative tasks, or you're the most organized person I know. Like, there's no way that you have ADHD.
And how do you respond to that? How do you feel when they say that?
I think it really minimizes my experience of, yeah, sure, you're seeing the final result, but this wasn't as easy as you think it was. And I know that has been something that's just been difficult for me all along, right? Like not feeling heard. And it compiles, right? Because like I'm a Black woman and my experiences have been dismissed pretty often. So usually my response is just education. I think that's just like the therapist in me of this is what my journey looks like. The thing that is one step for you feels like 12 for me. One of the examples I give often is going in the shower. When I'm going in the shower, I'm thinking about my towel. Where's my toothbrush? Turning on the water. Is it going to be too hot? Like, how long is it going to take? I'm going to have to feel the cat fur because we have too many cats. Like, it's a process that often feels like a burden. And at the end of the day, all is me getting clean and you don't have to smell me. But that is a lot of like mental work that I have to do to just
Hmm.
do a basic thing and be a person.
People think it's a compliment when they say to you, you don't look like you don't act like you have ADHD or whatever. And if they think they're giving you a compliment that you have this handicap, but it's not bad or something. And we take it the other way,
Yeah.
that they really don't see what our ADHD causes our life, the issues that it causes in our life. So yeah, they're diminishing us.
And I think
Yeah.
sometimes it's just a level of discomfort that people have with this is hard for me. Because what do you say to that?
That's, I think, the obvious, where it's a physical disability, people can see, yes, that would cause you difficulty. But something that's more internal, it's hard for people to say, oh, I can understand you have some difficulties. So what do you wish people knew about living with ADHD?
I think the hardest thing about living with ADHD for me is dealing with people who wish that I didn't have ADHD.
Is that what you said?
Yes.
And what about you? Do you wish you didn't have ADHD?
I couldn't say because I don't know any other way, right? So I'm definitely one of those people who believe that every experience I have has made me the person that I am, and I'm pretty happy with the person that I am.
Right.
So despite the fact that I recognize that things have been harder for me or I may have lost relationships, it's okay because I'm really happy with where I'm at, and I plan to continue to grow and change in a way that feels good in alignment with my values. But I think when I say that, like, the people who wish I didn't have ADHD, it looks like professors are really like rude about it. It doesn't hurt them at all. If you could just acknowledge that different people need different things, it'd be a lot less stress on me. It'd be a lot less stress on my students. If we could really take to heart, like, meeting people where they're at and like having the goal or the value of, I want to be supportive or I want to help people succeed in what they need and not what I feel like they should have, or they should be doing it this way because that's the right way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, to have a world that's more open-minded, that there's not just one way to do something. And if people tell you that I can do it, but I need to do it this way, that you're allowed to do that without judgment.
There's more than one way to do things.
All right. So thank you for your time, Arianna.
Of course. I think really the thing that, like, I'm left thinking about is, like, ADHD isn't like this superpower or this terrible thing. It's just part of who I am and like part of who we are as people. And what's been most helpful for me is like finding that acceptance of how does ADHD fit in like the jigsaw puzzle of who I am. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
We believe all girls with ADHD should get a fair start in life by getting diagnosed by age 8. Visit us at www.findtheadhdgirls.org. Thank you.